landings are like that, okay? You got
All right, this next email comes from the guy who emailed a few months back in the Great Lakes, and he was in his pool. I could see one of these things through his peripheral squatting down by the edge of the swamp or the pond or the forest or something, if I remember correctly, and watching him and his family in the pool. And then I think he shared with us he was going to set up and dump this thing with a high-power rifle. And I think I suggested it might be a bad idea. You might want to think about that before you pull that off. And he has emailed us back again with a follow-up. There we go. Hey Steve, Jeff here again from the heart of the Great Lakes. I am, and so is my original story, much closer to one of the major metropolitan areas of western lower Michigan. If you live and hunt anywhere near a creek, swamp, railroad tracks, and or power line, then you should have in the back of your mind that you are not the biggest, strongest thing on two legs in the woods. I want to try to fill you in on what's happened since this summer's dip in the pool. I'm not nearly as angry as I was initially about it all, still not exactly happy either. I've still only mentioned this to my wife. I'm hoping that others will have their own experience and that it can become something that I can eventually talk to others about. Kind of a weak take, but it's what I'm going with for now. I know how hard to believe this topic is if you have had your own sightings. As for this deer season, and yes, I know you disapprove, I skipped it entirely. Sucks. Not sure about next year either. I didn't even buy my license this year. But you don't understand hunting in Michigan. I want you and others to know that there are not many places in Michigan you can go if all of a sudden you lose your spot. It's all private property. Heading to the state land here is ridiculous. Not a safe thing to do in my opinion. We call those places pumpkin patches, orange spots all over the place, Went to some state land in the UP once, found a guy who was in green camo head to toe. Such a bad idea in Michigan. I decided not to hunt this year in part in keeping my son who hunts with me safe, and not have to explain it to him. How the hell do you tell a kid the boogeyman is real? I've been out to the spot where I saw this being since summer several times since, but never alone. I can't stop staring into the dark spaces. I did see it one more time, or maybe it was that it showed itself to me one more time. It was again hiding in the creek, squatting I guess, but not in the same spot as last time. It feels so hard to explain. Adults were doing yard work about 11 a.m. or so on a Saturday morning, so I'm assuming it was just watching. After it saw me, and I'm assuming it recognized me, it stood up the instant I turned my head away from the woods/creek. Little did I realize that I was watching as best I could peripherally. I saw it stand in the flash and it was gone to me, and then somehow my vision was obscured. I could tell it turned to its right, but in my mind all I could see was my mental image. It was all over so quick. I have not tried going into the woods that day. I've noticed that nearly every one of the trails in the woods has at least one log, quote, fall, end quote. Yes, I'm sure the trees are being pushed over onto the trails on purpose by this thing, across the trail. We've had numerous large bonfires to dispose of all these trees lately. Have it nearly all opened back up now. As for me, I'm still learning by all the facts you and others keep providing. Thanks for that. I don't care about the story being out there. Reading my story aloud isn't necessary for mental health. It's anything I can hope others realize these things hide and watch you, and only move when they know you're not looking. Seeing one, if that's what you're trying to do, isn't something it just happens. Your movements and noise are the attractant. It's like they're voyeuristic type of sicko creep, or at least that's my biggest realization so far. Last, I'm shocked to realize how many other encounters I've likely had. One of those walked on the roof of our house in the middle of the night when I was a kid, but we had no way of realizing what it was until hearing some of your stories. My sister first heard it on the roof, then saw it walking down our driveway that night decades ago. She told the entire family the next morning that a very tall man, super tall as the ceiling, was walking on the roof, and she saw him walking down our driveway after he got off the roof. He was black head to toe. Also, I was camping at Sleeping Bear Dunes Plate River campground, and at about 2 a.m. something was pushing against the canvas of our pop-up camper. It pushed against my toes as I slept because my toes were resting on the canvas. The thing against me is that it pushed back just enough to flatten the canvas. It woke me up. I pulled my foot back and listened to absolutely nothing. My toes from outside would have been about 5.5 feet off the ground. It wasn't a deer, it wasn't a black bear. Some other campers say. Some say. I don't think so. I never really knew what to make of that. Always somehow thought it was a bear. Good luck hunting and stay safe, Jeff. All right, Jeff, thanks for that follow-up. And obviously I am reading out loud because I am a firm believer that every single email sent in with obvious permission to share is going to help somebody, right? And to hear your what goes on with your mind, your reaction to this, how you've been carrying yourself, what your thoughts are after your first initial sighting is interesting to me, and I'm quite sure others. So there you go. Thanks for sending in. Be safe out there, and I hope you can build up the courage enough to go back hunting where you hunted before, man. Just do it. I do it, and I'm still here, and so do many other people. Just got to be a little more vigilant of your surroundings and go with your feelings. We know when your hair starts to turn to wire, just turn around, pack up, go home, and try again another day. But anyway, thanks again, and be safe out there, Jeff. All right, here's another one. Hi, Steve. Thanks for having an honest and open-minded space for people to relate their strange and often isolating experiences. I was encouraged to send this one and only experience I've ever had because of the strangeness of the sounds that I now realize others have heard, thanks to your channel. I also want to make this clear. We live in northern Westchester County, New York. It is semi-rural, spacious, but not wilderness. 15 minutes drive, and you're as much of suburbia as you can stomach. But these suburbs stretch all the way south to Manhattan, New York, about an hour drive away. We are not remote. Christmas Eve 2019, as we always do, we go to a huge gathering of my family and friends. It finishes before midnight, so as not to intrude on everyone's Christmas. We got home soon after midnight. No animals around, which is kind of strange. Thought nothing of it. My wife went to bed pretty soon thereafter. I chilled on the sofa watching something on YouTube, I think. Had headphones on. So about 30 minutes later, she comes back down saying she's calling me because of the noises outside. Of course, I hadn't heard them, but went outside to check it out. As I do, we have a neighbor and nothing for some distance but dense forest, an open field behind us, under a high-wooded ridgeline, a road in front, more trees, and a lake on the other side of it, pitch black at night. No street lights, no lights, occasional cars passing. Also, let me say, we get a lot of strange animal sounds. Deer cries, foxes, coyotes, fisher, cats, raccoons, owls, otters, bobcats. All can make some weird sounds. All I've heard before in the 17 years we've lived here. Can always pick them apart. So as I'm about to go outside, I hear this noise. A noise I can only describe as an old lady screech. Lower pitched than a scream and loud. Banshee loud. Louder than anyone could make trying to imitate it. No panic scream. A threatening, very loud death cry shriek that I could actually feel resonate. I'm not easily scared in our semi-rural environment. Aware, but never scared. But this was enough for me to go back into the house, get a flashlight and an axe, and go back out. Also, when I scare off coyotes, I make a loud, deep growl to let them know I'm there and make it sound like I'm big enough to be careful with when approaching. It works. I pat them right up on me and they take off pretty quickly. Anyway, I'm back out growling loud, flashlight facing the road where the sound came from. Then I hear it, but about 100 yards down the road and now on the right side of the road. So I go onto the road, only open space to see it, growling, flashing into the forest where the sound came from. I hear it screech again, so loud. I'm guessing about the same distance as before, but heading up beside us, to get behind us. I decided to go back into our yard and head toward the back stone wall, about 3 feet high. I'd have a more open view of the field behind if it cuts through. I'm still letting it know I'm there, and it gives a screech almost in response. At this stage, it's cutting across being directly behind, but maybe 100 yards straight back. I can hear heavy footsteps on the forest floor behind the field, cracking branches. Not violent, just like it's breaking trail, and more periodic, gut-wrenching screeches. It's making its way to the top of the ridgeline as a trace of noise. Never a glimpse, no eye shine, flashlight blazing at where I think It is the whole way. When I guess it's around the top, I hear the loudest howl I've ever heard. Went through me, enough to shake me. A big animal howl. And again, this is at least 100 yards away. So I yell as loud as possible back at it. There's a short pause. It screeches. Short pause. I yell back at it. It screeches. We're now in this back and forth, which goes on for a minute or two, but then I notice each screech getting slightly louder, and I realize it's coming back. At this point, I'm uncomfortable. This thing sounds big and heavy, has lungs much bigger than mine, is smart enough to circle around me, but avoid me, and is now making it clear it isn't afraid of me. Time to get inside. I back away, turn, and walk quickly toward the back door, maybe 30 yards away. Again, this thing is about 100 yards up the ridgeline when it starts moving in. I stop about halfway back, turn the flashlight behind me as I'm hearing heavy footsteps again, but very close. This time I get eye shine, about 5 or 10 yards past our stone wall, about 5 feet off the ground and bobbing around. I see a huge, dark, shadowy mass around it, whatever it is. It's huge, but hunched over, maybe crouching. Yellow eyes, teardrop in shape, the size of golf balls, about 4 inches apart. And in the time it took me 10 to 15 paces, it apparently came down off the ridge 100 yards. I'm done. I bolt and run flat out the door as this thing lets out an ear-shattering screech. I get to the door, open up, and quickly look back. No eye shine. No idea where it is, so I jump inside, lock the doors, turn out the lights, check all the windows, and wait, wishing I had a large caliber rifle. But just silence. Wife is wondering, what the hell? She heard it all. The neighbor had called. She heard it all and was freaking out. I have no idea what it is, just what I saw out there. I stayed up most of the night, no more sounds. When I heard animals come back around, I knew it had left, so I went to bed. Final thought. Out of the 3 people that actually witnessed this in our part, or full, final thought. Out of the 3 people that actually witnessed this in part or full, I am the only one that'll talk about it as a matter of fact. My wife and the neighbor won't discuss and dismiss or deflect. No wonder why stories are buried and lost. I'm not a wilderness guy, but have hiked the planet and been in strange and sometimes dangerous locations and situations. And this was genuinely weird and primarily frightening. And I can assure you, actually happened. Thanks for what you do. Always keep your mind open. John Purcell. You can quote me by name. All right, thanks, John. And yeah, I don't know if I'd have a set big enough to do what you did. Probably more because I know exactly what was making the noise once I heard it. But I can't imagine going out there with an axe and verbally challenging one of these things. I mean, from what we know now, you'd probably wake up with the axe up your butt sideways or something, right? Which you could easily do if it decided to. But it's kind of funny. With your experience here, it goes back to when I said a while back, I wonder what would happen if you just flipped one of these things the bird when it started to try to intimidate you or laughed at it and kept doing what you felt like doing anyway. It'd be kind of interesting to see what would happen. But then again, I have a funny feeling if somebody did do that, they wouldn't be around to tell us what the outcome was, right? What a crazy experience, man. Glad you survived it. I'm glad it's not happening every second night either on your home. That would really suck. Crazy. All right, here we go. Lad one warrant here. I got to take a bit of a break. Hi, Steve. I'm keeping up with you, David Plattis, and a few other sensible people out there. I don't know how familiar you are with the events at Skinwalker Ranch, but the scientists there watched an orb appear in the paddock from a ridgeline. With a night vision scope, the orb looked like a portal, and they watched a big black humanoid figure they described as looking like a Bigfoot crawl out of it and disappear into the night. To me, these things, along with all other weirdness, orbs, aliens, predator-like beings, dogmen, skinwalkers, all seem connected. Maybe it's just something in different forms. They seem to share the same behaviors. Isolation of an individual, loss of sound around them, feelings of dread, vanishing at will. It's like they want to be acknowledged and feared to show their superiority. The UFOs that hovered over nuclear missile silos in the US, UK, and Russia and shut down the nukes at will is the same thing. Superiority and a blatant message. Stop effing with this stuff. The kids in Zimbabwe who saw one land in their playground and a being stand beside it all said the feeling they got was, technology is being misused. You're killing the planet. We know we are, but the 1% won't let us change it. Why? Keep up the great work. Massive respect to you and those like you. Say what you mean and do the right thing. Andy. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I've definitely, obviously, I think probably all of us have listened to or read the account of the orb at Skinwalker Ranch with the Sasquatch-like figure bailing out of it. It's definitely an eye-opener, isn't it? This whole ball of wax is, the things some people don't want us to know are, they're just a bunch of head-shaking topics, aren't they? And facts. A lot of people out there complain. I've noticed, or I get notified of some comments. A lot of people say, how come you never talk about dogmen? Why don't you acknowledge dogmen? Well, for you guys, first off, I've never seen one. Okay, myself. Scott Carpenter, I think he has them on video, photograph. I think David Platt has seen one. I think. Don't quote me on that. Another guy here in BC that I did a radio interview with, he told me he's seen 3 of them near 100 Mile House in British Columbia. But I haven't seen them. I'm not familiar with them myself, and I read the emails to you as I get them. So I'm not deliberately skipping over any email that might be pertaining to a dog man. All right? It's just the way it's going. I'm not getting the emails. And I've never seen one. And none of my friends have seen one. And I've never heard of a report anywhere near my location here. Whereas I've got dozens of first-hand Sasquatch experiences right around my community. So there you go. There is a few more emails shared with you. Video 2. This is what happened to my buddy Mike Tucker and I in the spring of 1978. We were on an unsanctioned camping trip on the west side of Malpeque Bay. Okay, that's pronounced Malpeque Bay in Prince Edward Island, Canada, camping near the Boy Scout camp that we had both attended many times. We got dropped off on a highway miles from the camp so we could practice using our compasses and bushwhack our way back to the camp area. When we were about halfway to the camp, we found a tent fully set up that had not been used for a long time. When I walked around it, while looking for some evidence of why it was there but totally unused, I saw that the back wall was ripped in 3 slices, like it was slashed open with a very dull knife or something. We both found this very strange, considering it looked like it was set up months before and never used. We also found swales between the trees that were packed down like something slept there, but never had any footprints or anything around them. We could never figure out what slept in these dips. A few days later, we were exploring, and we were on a narrow beach area when this happened. I had a sudden sense of impending danger, and that tingling neck hair thing was starting. Mike was a few hundred feet ahead of me when I heard a snapping and hissing sound in the alder and spruce trees. I looked down the shore toward my buddy, and when I looked back at the spot where the sound was coming from, there was a fellow emerging from the clump of alders, and, as he moved out of the trees, I saw a mist was trailing behind him, and the hissing sound now had a weird static-like clicking sound. There was an odd smell in the air, like welding or the smell of a laser photocopier. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He did not answer, but kept walking toward the bay then. As he walked closer to the water, he turned his head to me and said, "They'll always trick you." I thought, what the living hell does that mean? Then I realized he was trying to warn me. His walk was animated like he was not in control of his body. When he turned his head, it was like a cartoon-like manner. It was as if his head was all he was in control of. He had a bewildered look on his face. As he moved past me, I could not really see the back of him much, only the weird mist trailing down the ground about 10 feet behind him. His shape was outlined by a black rolling coil of smoke that was rotating. Then there was the weird mist around him and behind him. I don't understand what could be happening to him, but then I realized at the time that I was leaning back because something was pulling me back towards him. And then I was overcome with the feeling that I was supposed to follow him. But this I resisted with all my will. At that point, I became nauseous and was struggling not to follow him and whatever this force was that he was caught up in. I watched him and this weird veil around him walk straight out into the water of the bay, and I saw his head go under as the mist lifted off the water and dissipated. Then the hissing and clicking sound faded away, and everything was calm. He never even thrashed or raised his arms at all. Nothing. Just nothing. It was like he accepted his fate. I was sitting on the sand at that point, like I was suddenly released from that thing. I felt weak and unsteady. It took all my strength to stand up and stagger back towards Mike. He was saying, come on, let's go," in a packed voice. My ears were not right either, and I had to swallow like I was in an airplane. I don't remember what happened for a little while after walking toward camp. I was so exhausted. I put up in my spruce bough bivouac an hour or more later, and Mike was not around, so I went across the dam to the main scout camp area, but no one was there. At first, until a man that I recognized as Scott Master from another town showed up, and I tried to tell him that a man walked into the water and drowned. He did not believe me whatsoever. Just then, Mike showed up, and this leader asked Mike what he had seen. Mike just stood there stunned, saying nothing, and would not talk at all. So the leader chastised me for telling lies and told us to leave the camp and go home. Mike would never acknowledge or talk about what happened that day, but after this event, he took a bad path and I lost track of him. I've never told this event to anyone until now. Watching a few of your videos has told me that you are one who understands. It affected my life. I was about to turn 14 when this happened, and I was a fearless, stubborn bastard for a young fella before this. I was far more cautious afterwards. I was also an amateur trapper for 2 years, and I felt there was something behind that clump of alders. The next day I went back to the spot, and there was absolutely no sign at all in or behind that clump of alder where I first saw the young man come from. Nothing was there except rabbit foraging trails low in the grasses and saplings. But in front of the alders, footprints began out of nowhere and headed toward the bay, from high-heeled street boots that he was wearing, and from my own Vibram-soled hiking boot prints were plainly visible. My heel marks were sunk 4 inches into the sand, where I was leaning back, trying not to be pulled in behind him. The force it felt like it was behind me and in front, and could see mist forming above the sand in front of my own feet when this was happening. I watched the local newspapers that summer, and no story about a missing man turned up. This occurred across the bay from an active Canadian military base, now closed, that conducted anti-submarine tracking activities in the North Atlantic and 413 Squadron search and rescue operations all over eastern Canada. I later learned from a retired American military officer that the base also stored American nuclear depth charges and had a lot more going on than the citizens ever got told, and I've always wondered if this young man was connected to the base somehow. I've had to live with this all my life, although I blocked it out for a time afterwards. This young man was alive and conscious when going into the water, and there was nothing I could do. What has the power to do this, and who were they that he said will trick you? Steve, I appreciate how you deal with skeptics. Keep it up. Blank, blank. I'll leave your name out. That is quite the story. And I'm trying to picture myself going through that experience and what would I do with it, and who would I tell, and where would I send it. I haven't a clue. But if you are listening to me right now, I think I would possibly strongly suggest that you send this email to David Plattis. And maybe even title it that Steve Isdall told you to send this, forward it to him to up the chances of him reading it, and possibly he may be interested in this email from you as well. All right. Wow. What an experience. And you know what? There's basically not much I can really say to that except share it for you and see if anybody out there listening to this right now has had something even remotely similar happen to them. And if you have, then possibly you could email it my way, and we'll share it with everybody and see if this may be a common denominator with a handful of people around North America or even the world. You never know, right? And let's just say it is. Well, how else are we going to find out? Right? Let's just say the same experience has happened to 20 more people, or 50 more people, or 1,500 more people. How are we going to find out? How would we find out? I guess this is the way we're going to find out, right? So there you go. There is another one. And what do we got here? We got another one. Hi, Steve. I don't bother telling my stories to very many people. And you, of course, know why. My name is Jim Barkley. I live in southern Alberta, and I don't care if you use my name. For your information, I've had several possible sightings over the years while hunting and fishing. This confirmed sighting was Waparas Creek, Alberta, October 71 while moose hunting. I say confirmed because I was close enough to the animal to confidently I say confirmed because I was close enough to the animal to confidently identify what it was. By the time I emailed the Waparas story to you a few months ago. Oh, by the way, I emailed the Waparas story to you a few months ago. Okay, here's the story of my second confirmed sighting and the other story of the evidence. Okay, here's the story on my second confirmed sighting and another story on an unidentified entity. Both cases involving invisibility. On September 27, 2015, 75 miles east of Prince George, BC, Highway 16. We were heading home to Alberta, driving east in occasional light rain about 8:20 a.m. when I saw a tall, dark brown or black two-legged vertical figure walking east on the right side of the highway ahead of us. It heard my car coming and started to run. I couldn't see its arms up. I could see its arms up and pumping like Bolt Hussein. I gunned it to get a closer look. It turned its body to look back at us, turned back around while still running and getting near the end of the guardrail. It just disappeared. Reaching the point of last observation, I slowed down to about the 50k mark to scan the muskeg and the open clear-cut hillside above it, but saw nothing. There was nowhere for this animal to go where I wouldn't be able to see it. I hadn't read anything at the time about the disappearing act, so I was totally confused as to what just happened. There was another witness in the car who, to this day, claims it was a deer. Okay, she wasn't wearing her distance glasses, but let's not get into that. But it's exactly what you're saying about some people just denying and never facing the reality of the situation. Later, after hearing about their ability to disappear, my thoughts were, that stretch of highway crossed over a good 500-yard section of open, quite treeless muskeg, and this thing was taking the quickest, easiest route across that swamp. It got caught partway across with us bearing down on it at high speed. There was no chance for it to get to cover, and the road was raised up above the muskeg, making for quite a drop down to the soggy, treeless muskeg, where it would be totally visible, so it used its next best escape tactic. And it worked. Physical description. Approximately 7 feet tall and rangy, muscular, athletic build. Never saw its face well enough for detail. On Google Earth, the nearest landmark was the Sugar Bowl Grizzly Den Provincial Park, south side of the Fraser River. Just another story, I guess, but the disappearing part is interesting. The second story involving invisibility occurred October 82, where an invisible biped entity walked by me within 30 feet in deep, crunchy poplar leaves in broad daylight. This was in big open poplars with excellent visibility. Whatever it was covered about 200 yards to get to and past me. I could hear it distinctly for 5 minutes with 2 to 3 seconds between steps and several breaks where it stopped for 10 to 12 seconds. Observing me, I guess? And yet I never did see it. Never saw the leaves compressing either. Oddly enough, while I was in high alert the whole time, I never felt fear. This occurred about 45 miles southwest of Calgary. And by the way, we got a moose that morning. Well, that's good. That's really good. Thanks, Steve, for all the work you do in producing this forum where people can voice their stories and maybe share some enlightenment on the subject. So many questions and so few answers. I'll say there is. But as you know by now, and so does every single person who's been following all these emails pouring in, and most of them from hunters, the disappearing act, quoting you, is very, very, very common. Not too many people want to acknowledge it or speak out loud about it. I don't know why. Because if it happened, it happened. If it happened, speak about it. I mean, we're to the point now, if you haven't figured it out yet, not too much in this lifetime is that impossible, right? Just the fact that we're upright and breathing is incredible in itself. So, but anyway, there is a couple more. It's endless. I've just have so many. I'm gonna sift through my phone here and find another couple more, make another video, and then I'm gonna crack open the ask me at howtohunt.com email and see what we get answered up while I remember to do it right now.